At a banquet, for some reason, my husband Stephen and my in-laws were ignoring me. The rest of the relatives reacted the same way. Feeling suspicious, I pretended to go to the restroom and secretly observed everyone from behind a cover. Then, I overheard a horrifying conversation. A barren daughter-in-law is an ominous presence itself. That's right. Talking to such ominous people might curse us too. It's better not to deal with her. Hearing these words, I was so angry that my body started shaking. Unforgivable. To be blamed for infertility and, moreover, to be ignored as if I didn't exist. It seems there's no choice but to carry out my plan right away. After slipping away from the venue secretly, my phone vibrated. It was Stephen on the call. "Hey! What have you done?" Stephen yelled in agony as soon as he spoke. I chuckled. "What are you panicking for? It's the truth, isn't it?" It seemed that an image I showed on the screen had driven Stephen into a frenzy. But the real counterattack starts now. I'm going to show him hell. My name is Melissa, I'm 35 years old. 9 years ago, at the age of 26, I married Stephen. We met at a party. Stephen, 2 years older than me, was very kind and we clicked immediately. As we started dating and thought about marriage, Stephen told me he intended to return to his hometown in the countryside to farm. The village, close to being a ghost town due to declining population, felt a crisis of becoming desolate. I was surprised, but eventually decided to follow Stephen's passionate request to join him. I, too, came from the countryside, albeit a different one. I had grown tired of living in an unfamiliar city. Luckily, my brother and his wife lived in my parents' house. Knowing that there was no need to take care of my parents later also pushed my decision. After that, things moved swiftly, and we got married. I quit my job and moved to this tiny village, Stephen's hometown. Though it's called a village, most of it consisted of Stephen's relatives. We lived in a large house originally inhabited by my in-laws, who then moved to a small annex on the next plot. They were cheerful and caring, always looking out for us. Farming was tough, but living surrounded by nature wasn't bad. Above all, the people of this village were kind. When I mentioned this, Stephen happily said, "It's all thanks to the Guardian." The Guardian is a statue, located in the village square. Not only in the square, but similar statues were scattered throughout the village. Some homes even had stuffed toys modeled after the Guardian. This village had its unique traditions. Everyone revered the Guardian as a literal guardian deity. According to Stephen, the Guardian never overlooked evil deeds and never forgave the wicked. That's why all the villagers were good people. Such legends are probably found in any old village. Thinking about this, I didn't dwell on it much. Life was peaceful, and I had completely forgotten about such things. But a nightmare was surely approaching. A few years after moving in, I had become accustomed to farming. Waking up early and quickly harvesting vegetables was my daily routine. Every day was unremarkable. But one thing bothered me. We still hadn't had any children. I was about to turn 30. I had always thought it would happen naturally, but recently, I started to feel anxious. This was because, after a few years, more people began asking, "Don't you have kids yet?" Each time, I cheerfully responded, "It's a blessing, but..." It's typical of an old farming village to bluntly ask such delicate questions. Everyone asked the same. Even my in-laws and occasionally an old man or woman passing by asked bluntly, "Why can't you have them?" I responded appropriately, but it gradually became annoying. One day, after a break in harvesting, I was called by my mother-in-law while drinking water. "Hey, Melissa. How are you managing your marital relations?" "What?" Caught off guard by such an absurd question, I nearly spit out water. "It's strange that you haven't had children for so many years. Aren't you satisfying, Stephen?" An unimaginable statement came from my mother-in-law, and I was dumbfounded. In a panic, I said, "What are you talking about? Please stop, that's not something people normally discuss," and abruptly ended the conversation. Yet, my mother-in-law continued, "It's important, you know," but I ignored her and stormed out of the room. I thought this village had old-fashioned values, but this is just ridiculous. It's creepy that they boldly ask about marital life. Having left the house, I decided to kill some time by walking to the square. Then, I saw someone. Could it be a neighbor? I tensed up for a moment. I was worried they might start talking about children again. But when I saw her face, I was relieved. It was Emily, a woman who lives nearby. Emily smiled shyly. I smiled back. Emily is the only person in the village who doesn't make rude remarks to me. She's about 10 years younger than me, so she must be around 20 now. Emily isn't originally from this village. After her parents died in an accident, she was taken in by her distant relative, an old lady in this village. This happened just before I came to the village. After graduating from a high school nearby, she now helps out with her grandmother's orchard. We occasionally pass each other on the street, but she's quiet and not very talkative, so we don't really converse much. She doesn't hang out with anyone, so the villagers call her an oddball. I used to think Emily was a bit dull because she didn't interact much. But now, I appreciate that she doesn't ask intrusive questions. I felt a bit cleansed thanks to Emily after the unpleasant experience with my mother-in-law. However, that didn't solve the problem. My mother-in-law, father-in-law, and other distant relatives in the neighborhood kept saying similar things. "You need to be more assertive with your husband, you need to take the lead," they would say anything they wanted. My mother-in-law then said something that gave me chills. "Last night's dinner was all vegetables. You should add more meat. Maybe adding garlic would boost Stephen's vitality." Why does she even know what we had for dinner last night? It's too nosy. Fed up, I decided to talk to Stephen about everything. I can't take it anymore. Everyone keeps asking about when we're gonna have kids. Your mom also pressed too much into our marital life. Honestly, it's tough. Stephen, who was watching TV, responded without taking his eyes off the screen. "What are you talking about? Mom and everyone else are just worried about you." "Worried? That's prying. Doesn't she say anything to you?" "Why would they say anything to me? Infertility is a woman's responsibility, isn't it?" "Well..." Stephen casually said something unbelievable. I was shocked that he had such outdated knowledge. I was appalled. "It's not always the woman's fault. Sometimes it's a compatibility issue, or it could even be the man's fault." "Me? No way." Stephen looked confused, genuinely puzzled. I understand the elderly in the village having old values. But I was surprised that even Stephen, who is relatively young, thought this way. "Anyway, I want a child too. I'm thinking about getting fertility treatment. We need to find the cause before we can address it." I suggested to Stephen that we go to a doctor together. But as expected, Stephen was reluctant and made excuses. "Why should a man go to such a place?" he complained, but I managed to persuade him to agree on the condition that we go to a hospital a bit far from the village. Later, we went to a hospital in another city and both got tested. A few weeks later, when we returned to the hospital, the doctor told us a fact. "There's no issue with you, Melissa. The problem is with your husband. He does not produce sperm. He has azoospermia." The moment Stephen heard this, he exploded. "What? It can't be my fault. Are you kidding me?" Stephen suddenly stood up and started yelling. I had never seen Stephen like this before. The doctor, with a troubled look, showed us the test results on a paper. Staring at the paper, Stephen fell silent with a terrible expression. He must have been shocked. I felt sorry for him and couldn't say anything. That night, I spoke to Stephen kindly. "The doctor said if we do more detailed tests, we might find the cause and get treatment. It's a bit far, but I'll help." But Stephen just looked down and didn't reply. He probably never imagined that he could be the cause. Feeling sorry for him, I couldn't say anything more and silently left the room. But soon, I realized that feeling sympathy was a mistake as Stephen's attitude began to worsen. The cruel truth of his azoospermia seemed to have shredded his pride as a man. Perhaps in an effort to regain his shattered self-esteem, he became unusually aggressive. I was the main target of his frustrations. He criticized me for being slow at farm work, for the food not being tasty enough. He started picking fights over trivial things, growing angrier more frequently. Initially, I remained silent, thinking he just couldn't accept the test results, feeling sorry for him. But as it continued, I too began to lose my patience. Our arguments increased, turning our home into a constant battleground. Naturally, there was no intimacy, so having children was out of the question. Going to the hospital for treatment was absolutely out of the question. Moreover, the villagers still believed my infertility was to blame. The situation where I was the only one criticized remained unchanged. I wanted to tell Stephen's parents the truth, but Stephen glared at me with icy eyes, warning, "Don't tell anyone." The thought of what might happen if I spoke up was frightening. And I didn't have the courage to do it. Besides, I wasn't even sure if they would believe me. After all, everyone's thinking was outdated. The conventional belief that infertility is a woman's fault prevailed. That's probably why Stephen had reacted so violently when he was pointed out as the cause. As this life continued, I started to feel I couldn't bear it anymore. I understood he was shocked, but this was outright displacement of blame, and I felt like a punching bag. Maybe it would be better to separate. I was beginning to think that way. Half a year passed, and Stephen's snide remarks continued. By then, I had firmly decided to get a divorce. However, the problem was once again the old-fashioned mindset of the village. Divorce was seen as disgraceful. I had heard rumors of a woman who suggested divorce being verbally abused by her husband. Considering this, it was unlikely I would get easy consent. So, I thought about leaving the signed divorce papers and fleeing the village. It was a drastic measure, but I was driven to it. I began to prepare secretly so that Stephen wouldn't notice. Then, the next month, Stephen was supposed to be out of the village for the day, delivering crops. It was the perfect opportunity. But while I was packing my bags, the front door opened.
Why?
There stood Stephen, who was supposed to be out. His eyes were furious as he shouted, "Where are you going?" When I remained silent, Stephen glanced at the divorce papers on the desk.
You were going to divorce me? Are you kidding me? If people find out my wife ran away, it would be a disgrace. Don't you dare embarrass me.
It was the reaction I had expected. After a tirade of abuse, he threatened, "If you ever think about running away again, you know what will happen," and glared at me sharply. My plan had failed. I was desperate. Yet, how had he found out? I had been careful to act discreetly. From then on, Stephen's treatment of me worsened. He complained that the cleaning wasn't thorough, that just seeing my face irritated him. Any backtalk from me would lead to serious trouble.
You are the worst kind of woman, running away from her husband. The guardian sees everything. Your misdeeds will be exposed.
That became Stephen's mantra. Lately, even the mention of the guardian by the villagers started to disgust me. I had thought it was just superstition, but could that statue really be watching me? It's hard to believe that those trying to escape the village receive punishment. But the fact that my whereabouts and actions were precisely guessed was indeed true. I had become utterly frightened. Gradually, a sense of resignation began to grow within me. As time passed, I was about to turn 35. One day, Emily, who lives nearby, came to visit. "It's rare to see you. What's up?" Over time, Emily and I had started to talk a bit whenever we met. Unlike the other villagers who thrived on rumors and judged harshly, Emily never pried into my life and always treated me with unchanged kindness, the only woman who did so. "Melissa, there's something I really need to say." I was taken aback by the seriousness on Emily's face. I invited her inside and made some coffee. Then, Emily looked around nervously and gestured for me to come closer without saying a word. We entered a room that was now used as a storage room and seldom entered.
What's going on?
As I followed her in, confused, I asked her this question, and she murmured as if relieved.
We should be safe here.
Then she began to pour out her words as if a dam had burst. I can't take it anymore. This village actually. That's when she told me a shocking fact. It was about the true nature of this terrifying village. Months later. Since then, Emily and I had met secretly several times. After learning the truth about the village, we had been trying to figure out a way to escape. The truth Emily shared was shocking. Hearing such things only made me more eager to escape as soon as possible. But we needed to act carefully. If our plan was discovered, it would be over. It took time, but finally, the day to act was set. This Sunday. A banquet related to the guardian, held once every few years, would gather all the village relatives. We couldn't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Emily and I had discussed and done what needed to be done. Everything was prepared. All that was left was to put our plan into action. The gathering was at night. The venue was the village's only restaurant. Although the building was old, it had enough capacity to accommodate most of the villagers. Like years ago, I went there in the afternoon to help, as I had helped before. My in-laws were there, so I greeted them with, "Good morning." However, after a brief glance at me, they quickly disappeared somewhere. Maybe they were busy. Thinking so, I decided to help with preparing the food. But not just my in-laws, the other relatives too, were unresponsive to anything I asked. In fact, to be honest, they were ignoring me. Had I done something wrong? Confused, time passed, and it became night. Soon, the relatives and other villagers began to arrive. Stephen was among them. But his attitude was the same. For some reason, he ignored me. It felt like I had become a ghost. Without understanding why, only anxiety and irritation grew within me. So, I pretended to go to the restroom to secretly listen to their conversations. Then, a terrifying conversation hit my ears.
Melissa never did have children, did she? At her age, it's probably impossible now. Oh dear, an infertile daughter-in-law is just bad luck. She must be cursed by the guardian.
My mother-in-law began with a tone of disgust, and a clearly drunk Stephen nodded in agreement.
Yeah. Talking to such an unlucky person might curse us too. It's better for everyone not to deal with her.
Of course. I made sure to inform the villagers last night. I told them that speaking to Melissa would bring the guardian's curse, my father-in-law added with a laugh. Hearing their words, I began to shake with anger. Unforgivable. It wasn't my fault I couldn't have children. And to think, to be deemed an ominous presence. To be ignored on top of that, is this what adults do? No matter how you look at it, this village is wrong. We should carry out our plan immediately. We intended to flee this village. But that alone wasn't enough to settle my feelings. I had to somehow strike back at them. I was resolved. Soon, Emily appeared from the venue. The timing was perfect. Without saying a word, Emily and I nodded to each other. Then, I turned off the lights at the venue. Suddenly, it was dark, and voices could be heard asking, "What happened? Is it a power outage?" Amidst the confusion, Emily tampered with a computer that was placed in a corner of the venue. Originally, there was a computer, projector, and screen set up for today's event to reflect on the guardian and the history of the village. We decided to use that setup. After a while, a certain image appeared on the screen.
What is this?
Stephen screamed. My in-laws, other relatives, and villagers were also staring at the screen, causing a commotion.
Who did this? Melissa? Where are you?
Stephen became frantic and started causing a scene, so Emily and I decided to retreat for the moment. We discreetly left the venue and met outside. About 3 minutes had passed since we escaped when my phone began to vibrate repeatedly. It was Stephen calling relentlessly.
Melissa! What have you done?
He screamed in agony as soon as I answered. I chuckled.
What are you panicking for? It's the truth, isn't it? It seemed like everyone was under the wrong impression, so I just wanted to set the record straight.
The image projected was the result of a medical examination from years ago. It was a diagnosis that confirmed Stephen's azoospermia. The large text displayed on the big screen was enough to astonish everyone present at the venue. Stephen, having his closely guarded secret exposed, was in a state of panic. He seemed extremely confused and kept shouting incoherently. He was making so much noise that I quickly hung up the phone. My phone kept vibrating afterward, but of course, I ignored it. Emily looked at me with concern.
Is everything okay? Just as I expected. But we need to push a little more.
The harm I had suffered wasn't something I could just let go of. Emily and I returned to the banquet hall together. Peeking into the venue, it had turned into a scene of utter chaos.
Is this really true? You were infertile? Stephen, it can't be.
Everyone was confronting Stephen. His face turned pale as he kept saying, "This is a lie, it's a conspiracy by Melissa," sweating profusely as he made excuses. The villagers had believed that our inability to have children was my fault, the woman's fault. But the truth was different. At the time of the examination, there was nothing about me that could cause infertility. It was Stephen's azoospermia that had prevented us from having children. Yet, without being able to tell the truth, I was blamed. I was reproached as if not having children was a sin, and my existence was ignored. The numerous verbal abuses and the painful days I had to endure were not something I could forgive. Emily and I entered the buzzing venue.
Melissa! What are you doing?
Stephen shouted at me.
Don't mess with me. Doing something like this. You'll be cursed by the guardian. You'll face terrible consequences.
At his words, I snapped. What guardian? You were just spying with security cameras. How creepy. As I said this, the room fell silent. Hitting the nail on the head, Stephen, my in-laws, and the villagers turned pale. Yes, the guardian was not a protective deity. In fact, surveillance cameras were installed inside the guardian. Cameras were hidden not only inside the stone statues around the village, but also inside the stuffed toys of the guardian that were displayed in our living rooms. These were monitored by board elders in a room at the community center, who watched the actions of outsiders. That's why my attempts to escape were well known. I had learned this from Emily on that day. About 10 years ago. Around the time Emily was taken in by an elderly woman in the village after losing her parents. Lonely Emily had once secretly followed her grandmother to work because she missed her. Her grandmother went to the community center. There, she and the elders laughed and chatted while watching the villagers through surveillance cameras. At that moment, Emily learned about the village's secret legacy of the guardian cameras. Shocked, Emily somewhat understood the village atmosphere. The reason rumors spread so quickly was this. It was bad enough to be the subject of idle gossip, but being watched while walking down the street or even inside the house was too much. Emily despised the village's tendency to invade others' privacy. Emily tried to stay out of the gossip. So the villagers started calling her odd for not joining their circle. She was fed up with the village, but she had no relatives and nowhere else to go. She had no choice but to endure life there. But one day, as her 25th birthday approached, her grandmother began pressuring her to go on arranged dates. You need to have children soon or you'll end up infertile like Melissa, she was told, and persistently pushed to marry an elderly widower living on the edge of the village. Naturally, Emily refused such an unreasonable demand. However, her grandmother began to threaten her, saying that such defiance would bring the curse of the guardian upon her. When Emily could no longer bear it, she thought of me, hoping I could help. Knowing the tragic experiences I had faced due to gossip, she approached me to escape the village together. The reason Emily had moved from the living room to another room that day without speaking was because she had spotted a guardian plushie there. I hadn't paid any attention. I thought it was just another plushie, common around the village. but there was a camera hidden inside it. It was likely installed by Stephen to monitor my activities. That explained why my every move seemed to be known. When I tried to escape, and even when my mother-in-law accurately guessed what we had for dinner. Because they were watching through the camera, it was obvious to them. I felt a chill at the sheer horror of it. My instincts told me it was dangerous to stay in this village. Taking up Emily's suggestion, we decided we must escape the village as soon as possible. We planned together. But was escaping enough? I felt I couldn't rest without avenging the years of mistreatment. I thought about it. First, I had to clear my own name. And then,
Emily! Did you talk? Traitor!
Her foster grandmother yelled furiously. But Emily glared back at her.
I appreciate that you took me in when I had no one, but I can't stand living like this. Sneaking around, peeking into other people's lives, living off gossip and backstabbing, I absolutely hate it. How could you say that?
The grandmother and the other villagers began to make a commotion. To silence them, I decided to deliver the final blow. I manipulated the computer and displayed new images on the screen. The images that appeared one after another shocked everyone. Stephen is flirting with a young woman in the village. My mother-in-law secretly added the juice of a dirty rag to the coffee she served at village meetings. My father-in-law put his hands around the shoulders and waist of a married woman. Emily's grandmother stealing vegetables from someone's garden. And almost all the villagers caught in embarrassing acts they wouldn't want to be known. Everyone at the venue was speechless. Stephen exclaimed,
When did you take these pictures?
Why was it possible to capture such compromising photos of everyone? Emily explained. It was impossible that all the villagers were good people. Knowing where the cameras were, they would have acted in the blind spots if they had anything to hide. We focused on the blind spots, places that were out of sight of the guardian statues and plushies, and identified the most convenient spots for misdeeds to occur, where we planted our own small cameras purchased online. Then, the village scandals just kept coming out. The villagers were naturally committing minor wrongs in places they thought were not covered by cameras. They had claimed all along that all the villagers were good people. It was truly laughable. We captured crucial moments from the camera footage and saved them. And now, we exposed those images in broad daylight. An eye for an eye. Since my privacy was violated, I did the same to them. This should teach them how deplorable it is to indulge in spreading rumors about others. The villagers fell silent in shame.
What do you mean all villagers are good people? Just a bunch of scum. You enjoy spying on outsiders and having a laugh. Give me a break. I don't want to stay in this outdated, privacy-less village for one more second.
I shouted loudly and thrust the divorce papers in front of Stephen. Caught off guard, Stephen stood frozen, mouth agape. My in-laws and villagers were also stunned. They probably never thought I would fight back. Indeed, there was a time when I almost gave up. But now, with Emily as my ally, finding a way out, I could no longer just sit back and take it. I looked down quietly at them, stunned. Goodbye, pitiful everyone.
Goodbye,
echoed Emily, her gaze full of contempt for the villagers. We left the banquet hall without looking back. Once outside, we picked up 2 suitcases that we had hidden in the barn. These contained all the essentials we needed for our new lives. The divorce papers were already left at the house, and now, with these suitcases, all we had to do was walk out of the village. However, as we were leaving, I suddenly stopped in my tracks.
What's wrong?
Emily asked, puzzled. I just have to do this, I said, grabbing a hoe that was leaning against a farmhouse. I headed to the square and swung the hoe with all my might. A tremendous noise erupted as the statue of the guardian was spectacularly destroyed. Of course, the surveillance camera inside it shattered into pieces as well. That was quite spectacular, Melissa. There's no point in leaving that thing intact. That felt refreshing. We laughed together. Then, we destroyed every single small guardian statue throughout the village. Naturally, we had already thrown away any related plushies inside the house. It's incredible to think how frightening this setup was. The guardian statues were originally created long ago to scare misbehaving children. "The guardian will scold you if you do something bad" was an effective piece of education back then. But as times changed, this method of teaching young children evolved into a tool for punishing anyone the villagers disliked. It mainly targeted people like me, who came from outside the village, and those like Emily, who did not try to blend in. Initially, it was just a way for people to gather and nitpick on those who did not conform to village norms. It probably started as just a bit of idle gossip to pass the time. However, over time, this gossip evolved into a network of surveillance cameras, ensuring constant monitoring. In this closed-off village, the absurd superstition of the guardian became a normalized justification for spying on others. Not only is it problematic to expose people's privacy, but the persistence in outdated thinking is equally troubling. The negative energy filling this warped village eventually seemed to corrode the hearts of its residents. More than any curse or retribution, I have come to find human actions far more frightening. I refused to stay in such a place any longer. We left the backward, rotten village behind without a backward glance. Later, I heard through the grapevine that infighting had begun among the villagers after I exposed their wrongdoings. Following ugly disputes, the villagers split up. Communication completely broke down, impacting even their farming activities. Lack of coordination led to frequent mistakes, and blame shifting began. Naturally, the quality of vegetables deteriorated, and the agricultural cooperative started to complain. The village could no longer sell its produce. As a result, almost everyone fell into poverty. As for Stephen, he managed to get divorced. Worried that he wouldn't file the divorce papers I had left at home, I consulted a lawyer after leaving the village. The lawyer intervened, and it turned out Stephen did fill out and submit the divorce papers. He apparently remarried quickly because he wanted to be with the woman he had an affair with, who lived on the outskirts of the village. But with the village facing a food shortage, Stephen's household was also struggling to make ends meet. The woman he remarried eventually left him. My in-laws were also out of money and spent their days in constant quarrels. No matter how miserable they became, I could not muster any sympathy for them. I never want to have anything to do with them again, nor do I wish to remember them. As for Emily and me, we are now living peacefully in a new place. However, the journey here was not easy. Emily had no relatives, and at my parents' home, my brother and his wife were living, so I couldn't impose on them. After leaving the village, we had no one to rely on. That's why we had already started looking for jobs in secret before we left. Because of the surveillance cameras, we couldn't move around too openly. We planned our meetings in a camera-free storage shed and arranged everything via computer. This took some time, but after several online interviews, I finally found a job. My experience in clerical work before I got married came in handy. I was hired as a temporary employee, which was fine by me. We had also found a small place to live. No matter how cramped, it was far better than the village environment. Since Emily had no experience outside of farm work and was struggling to find a job, she decided to live with me in my place while looking for work. Soon after we left the village, Emily secured a job. Fortunately, being in her 20s and willing to start in an entry-level position helped, despite her lack of experience. Eventually, my hard work was recognized, and I was promoted to a permanent employee. My salary increased, and I was able to move from a small place to a condo. Subsequently, Emily became independent and moved into a nearby condo. Now, we both have made friends at work and in our community, enjoying every day. Leaving the village was truly the best decision. There was a time when I lost my husband, my home, and my job, but by having the courage to start anew, I was able to reshape my life. I wish I could tell my past self not to give up. By acting with hope and not giving up, I have achieved the life I have today.
I can't take it anymore. Please, let's get a divorce.
Divorce? You're just after my money, aren't you? Just so you know, you're not getting any of my assets if we split. Yes, and if we do divorce, you're taking our daughter with you. After the divorce from her husband, she enjoyed quiet days. However, about a week after she moved back to her parents' home, her smartphone repeatedly rang.
Hello? Hey, it's Karen. Please help me.
My name is Kelly, and I'm a 31-year-old homemaker. I met Ken, my husband, after I started working. At the age of 25, I was invited by a friend to a matchmaking party where I met him. We kind of hit it off, and he seemed to take a liking to me and pursued me passionately. After several dates, we started dating and eventually got married. After we got married, at his request, we rented an apartment close to his parents' house. Although there were some disagreements, we maintained a good distance from his easygoing father and somewhat stern mother without any major issues. Our busy yet peaceful days were happy, and life with my husband was a lot of fun. One day, I found out I was pregnant, which thrilled me as I had always wanted children. Thinking about the future, I planned to return to work after maternity leave, but my husband wanted me to take care of our baby and stay close to the child, so I quit my job. I agreed with my husband's thinking, so I didn't regret quitting at all. Above all, my husband, who told me to rest assured because he would provide for us, was dependable. But not everything about being pregnant was joyful. When I told my in-laws about the pregnancy, my father-in-law was very happy and congratulated us, but my mother-in-law had a stern look on her face and said to me, "Make sure you have a boy." Her words weighed heavily on me. I loved my child, whether it was a boy or a girl. However, my mother-in-law strongly hoped for a boy. To avoid any unnecessary drama, I just smiled and brushed it off at the moment, but it really upset me. I'm not having a child for my mother-in-law or anyone else. I just want to build a happy home with my coming child and my husband. But now that I'm gonna be a mom, I need to be able to keep a straight face even when pressured like this. I decided I need to be strong. However, with the severe morning sickness dragging on, I started losing my mental composure, and it became hard to just laugh off the pressure from my mother-in-law. Foods that I used to enjoy before pregnancy now make me nauseous just by looking at them. My cravings keep changing, and I've been in a physically and mentally tough situation. It's gotten to the point where I don't even want to go outside, and I've been staying home more and more. Despite how bad I felt lying there nauseous, my husband unreasonably demanded housework. "Hey, where's my dinner?" "Sorry, the morning sickness is really bad. I haven't been able to make it yet." I had told him beforehand to eat out. There was a high chance I wouldn't be able to make dinner also. But he just glared at me with a harsh face.
Huh? Morning sickness isn't a sickness, right? Then don't slack off on the chores. Get up and cook, you lazy bum.
With a look of disgust and a heavy sigh, my husband glared at me. I wish I could do the housework properly if I could. But cooking has been difficult with constant nausea. My husband wouldn't forgive me.
Come on, get up off the couch already. You're really sloppy.
All I could do was apologize while suppressing my nausea. "I'm sorry, but I've been feeling sick all the time. Just the smell of the food ingredients makes me want to throw up. Let me rest a bit more and then I'll cook. Why don't you take a bath first?" When I said that, my husband looked exasperated. "Are you still planning to rest? I can't believe you're always at home and can't even manage your health. You know you're being supported by me, right?" That's how he always harshly throws words at me. Reluctantly, I got up unsteadily and, while enduring his sarcastic remarks, I made his dinner. Since the pregnancy started and morning sickness kicked in, my husband began to make verbally abusive comments. He used to say, "Don't worry, I'll support us," but now it's, "Be grateful that you're being supported." Where did that reliability go? The pressure repeatedly put on me by my mother-in-law, who came to check on me now and then, seemed to make my morning sickness worse. The only one who scolded them and showed understanding of my condition was my father-in-law.
Why do you keep putting pressure on her like this? Normally, you'd be kinder and watch over her. Don't you know how hard pregnancy can be?
When the dignified father-in-law spoke, even the mother-in-law fell silent. His presence was truly a blessing. Thanks to my father-in-law, I was able to get through several tough periods of morning sickness and reach the day of delivery. The baby born was a very cute girl. I named her Hannah, hoping she would shine as her name suggests. This must be what they mean when they say the apple of my eye. She was truly angelic. My husband was also delighted with our long-awaited child. My father-in-law was very happy too, lifting my daughter in his arms. In contrast to the doting father-in-law, the mother-in-law didn't pay any attention to my daughter. I had thought she would cherish her once she was born, but it seems she only acknowledged boys.
You really did it, huh? I told you to have a boy, didn't I? Why couldn't you do what you were told?
If there's someone out there who can choose the gender of their baby and deliver accordingly, I'd love to meet them. I was utterly fed up with my mother-in-law's irrational remarks. From then on, my mother-in-law acted as if my daughter didn't exist, and she started attacking me with even harsher words than when I was pregnant. Even when my daughter tried to play with her grandmother, she would quickly go away as if to say, "Don't come near." And my husband did nothing to admonish his mother. On the contrary, although he was happy right after our daughter was born, as soon as he realized how tough parenting was, he decided that housework and childcare were women's work and left it all to me. I was deeply disappointed with my husband who wouldn't help with anything around the house or with our child. It's unbelievable he wouldn't even spend time with his own precious daughter. Even our young daughter could feel she was being treated unfairly, saying she didn't really like daddy and grandma, and she didn't warm up to my husband or mother-in-law. It's no surprise they were displeased by our daughter not being affectionate towards them. But such convenient things just don't happen. The only one who reached out to help me, overwhelmed with childcare, and thought of my daughter was my father-in-law alone. He would help out with the housework, saying, "Rest, I'll handle this," and played with my daughter, showing how much he supported us. However, one day, this pillar of support had an accident while out and injured his leg, leading to hospitalization. That's when my mother-in-law's tyranny began. With my father-in-law out of sight, she began calling me and my daughter to her house more frequently, claiming it was an emergency.
"Kelly, come quickly, it's an emergency."
Rushing to my in-laws' house, I found my mother-in-law smirking with a broom in hand. "You're not working, so can you clean up? And do the shopping too, please." That's how she started dumping all the housework on me. At its worst, I even had to run errands to buy snacks she craved from the department store. My mother-in-law, also a homemaker with plenty of time, never worked herself. If I protested, even in front of my daughter, the sarcasm would come back tenfold. That's why I gradually stopped resisting. My husband did absolutely no childcare or housework, just loafed around whenever he was home. And my mother-in-law, thinking I should be the one moving, never once scolded him. It happened on the way back from shopping with my daughter, as instructed. Around the corner near my in-laws' house, I could hear my mother-in-law and a neighbor talking. I naturally stopped and listened in on their conversation.
"My daughter-in-law is so selfish and rude, it's terrible. She complains about everything, truly the worst. My son is so kind that he looks the other way, but I feel like I need to teach her properly. Having a bad daughter-in-law is such a struggle for a mother-in-law."
The topic my mother-in-law was happily chatting about was her gripes about me. As if agreeing with her demeaning tone, several people were laughing. If she thinks it's so bad, she should do the housework herself. Was everything I did for my mother-in-law meaningless? I instinctively gripped my daughter's hand tighter. And as the conversation got more heated, my mother-in-law even began to complain about my daughter.
"And the granddaughter isn't cute at all. She doesn't warm up to me one bit. It must be her mother putting ideas in her head. Otherwise, she would naturally like me."
I quickly covered my daughter's ears, but she might have heard a bit, as her expression clouded over. It's not me but my mother-in-law who is the reason she doesn't warm up, yet she always wants to blame others. Because of my mother-in-law spreading gossip, neighbors started whispering and looking at me suspiciously. I'd want to rely on someone, but my family is as far as a plane ride away, and I don't have friends nearby. If I stay here any longer under these conditions, I'm gonna lose it. Though I haven't planned any specific actions yet, my desire to get a divorce was growing. At least I should try to reduce the time I spend at home more than necessary to avoid my mother-in-law. If I could start working, it would distance me from my in-laws and prepare me for the future. Housework, childcare, and work would increase, but I wanted to keep my distance from my mother-in-law. For that, I needed to put my daughter in daycare. I decided to discuss it with my husband right away. But he furrowed his brows and yelled at me.
Huh? Of course not. How can you even think of leaving your child with someone else? Are you even a real mother? That's absolutely unacceptable. You're really a terrible wife.
How could he say that? He's always lounging around on weekends and never takes care of our daughter. To my surprise, my husband immediately contacted his mother. He tattled as if it were wrong for me to want to work, and upon hearing this, my mother-in-law rushed over from her house.
What are you thinking? It's natural for a mother to stay at home and take care of the house. Why don't you understand that?
My mother-in-law shouted angrily like that. Basically, both my husband and mother-in-law just want me to be a convenient housekeeper. If I went to work, their handy helper would be gone. Being attacked by both of them at once, I didn't even have a chance to respond, and the next day the snide remarks from my mother-in-law got worse. Eventually, all talk of daycare and working fizzled out. After a while, my father-in-law was discharged from the hospital, but the days of being summoned by my mother-in-law whenever he was away continued. And the days of being belittled and burdened with menial tasks drained me more and more. My husband, too, would blame me along with his mother without defending me. Trapped, my spirit began to erode. Gradually, I found it hard to eat, and sleepless nights became more frequent. Sometimes my stomach would suddenly hurt, or tears would come even though I wasn't sad. Seeing the tears rolling down my face silently, my daughter looked at me with a worried expression. I knew this couldn't go on, causing unnecessary worry to my young daughter. That's why I started going to a psychiatrist. The likely cause was severe stress, which I had plenty of reason to suspect. Maybe I really should get a divorce. Though the thought of divorce crossed my mind many times, it would mean taking away her father from my daughter. Plus, I hadn't even secured a job yet. Could I really go through with a divorce under these circumstances? With so many uncertainties, I found it hard to take that first step. But as a means of self-defense, I started carrying a voice recorder just in case. It might come in handy someday. I think I just wanted to create anything that could serve as a mental anchor. Then, several months later, one day while my husband and father-in-law were at work, as usual, my mother-in-law called me over. The task was to clean the second floor. I did as I was told and started heading up the stairs. That's when, unexpectedly, everything began to spin. A sudden bout of dizziness. As I held my head, my body started leaning backwards. Then, I tumbled down the stairs. When I came to, I was curled up in the hallway on the first floor. My whole body throbbed with pain. My head was foggy, and I couldn't move. Perhaps the loud noise alerted her, because my mother-in-law came to see what had happened. Despite the terrible pain, this was one time I was thankful she came. The pain was so severe I couldn't get up, so I asked my mother-in-law to call for an ambulance. However, she just laughed dismissively. "You're exaggerating. You're conscious, aren't you? Besides, if we call an ambulance, the neighbors will think something's happened. Don't embarrass me like that. If you're really in pain, get up and go by bus. But finish cleaning up first." I was speechless at her response. Telling someone who can't get up to take the bus is insane. This went beyond mere mother-in-law troubles. Even at such a time, my mother-in-law wouldn't lend a helping hand. I guess I had no choice but to handle it myself. "All right, but I'm really in pain, so please let me go to the hospital first." Could you please look after my daughter for a bit?
What? What are you saying? Take your daughter with you. Are you listening?
I wanted to take my daughter, but it wasn't feasible to bring such a small child in my condition. It would be dangerous if I collapsed again with her there. I reluctantly left my daughter with my mother-in-law and managed to stand up using the wall for support. Even grabbing my bag was painful. In this condition, I doubted I could even make it to the bus stop. So, I called a taxi and somehow made it to the hospital despite the pain. The diagnosis was a fracture. Because I couldn't brace myself properly during the fall, I was told I needed to be hospitalized. Even though it would be a short stay, the thought of informing my husband and mother-in-law weighed heavily on me. Nevertheless, I had no choice but to contact them, and upon hearing the news, my husband and mother-in-law, visibly irritated, came to my hospital room. My frightened daughter immediately ran to my bed and tightly gripped my hand with her little hands. Tears were welling up in her eyes. Then, almost immediately, my husband and mother-in-law began shouting loudly.
Hey, what are you doing? You hurt yourself and even used my money to call a taxi without asking. That's right. Dumping your child on me and going to the hospital without even finishing the cleaning. That's unbelievable. I had plans to go to the department store, and you messed them up.
As they hurled relentless insults at me, my stomach began to ache as usual. If only my husband would help with the housework and childcare, and if only my mother-in-law wouldn't delegate chores to me, maybe I wouldn't have had the dizzy spell on the stairs. I was fed up with their selfish behavior that seemed to last forever. Thinking about enduring this situation until my daughter was grown up, about 20 years from now, left me speechless. And finally, I let out my feelings to them unrestrained.
I can't take it anymore. Please, let's get a divorce.
The words I had hesitated to say just flowed out of me this time. It must have been because I was so distressed. There was a moment of silence that followed. Both of them stared at me with wide eyes. But the next moment, my husband and mother-in-law burst out laughing. Divorce? You're after my money, aren't you? Just so you know, you won't get a dime of my assets if we divorce. That's right, and if we do divorce, you should take our daughter with you. I don't want a granddaughter like her anyway. Thinking that I, a jobless woman, couldn't possibly divorce, they continued to disregard their own words and actions. They smirked and laughed as they left the hospital room, spouting insults at me. I then stroked my daughter's head, who was looking at me worriedly. I had finally brought up divorce. Though I was concerned about depriving my daughter of her father, it was more important to remove her from such a toxic environment. Unable to leave my daughter with my husband and mother-in-law who had just left, I reluctantly called my parents who lived in a distant area. It had been a while since I heard my parents' voices. I told them I might be getting a divorce, about my fracture, and that I wanted to leave my daughter with them until the divorce was finalized. My parents sounded alarmed and immediately said they would come over. They quickly booked plane tickets and made their way to the hospital.
Kelly, are you okay?
When my parents arrived in the hospital room, they looked at me and my daughter with concern. As I detailed what my husband and mother-in-law had done, my parents had stern expressions on their faces. I couldn't stop crying as I talked. You've endured so much, but I wish you had reached out to us sooner. You are always our precious child. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I was relieved that my parents listened to my story. But it must have been hard for them to tolerate their child being treated so poorly. After asking me to wait a bit, they left and actually went to confront my in-laws. When they returned, they shared what had happened at my in-laws' house. My father-in-law was there too, having returned from work, and after hearing everything from my parents, he immediately apologized. I am truly sorry for hurting your precious daughter. Then, he turned to my husband and mother-in-law, visibly angry.
What are you doing? Did you enjoy bullying my daughter-in-law while I was away? I didn't raise a son to be such a disgrace. And you, behaving like this as a wife, embarrass me. What do you think of your granddaughter? Rejecting her because she isn't a boy or because you think she isn't cute, what right do you have?
It seemed that my father-in-law was genuinely angry, but my mother-in-law and husband showed no signs of remorse and kept making excuses. Every time they opened their mouths, it was to blame me and absolve themselves of any wrongdoing. Seeing that they remained unrepentant even after being scolded, my parents were utterly dismayed. They then told me to go ahead with the divorce and expressed their support for my decision. After a short hospital stay, I was discharged, and with the divorce papers in hand, I headed straight to my in-laws' house. Determined to focus only on my daughter and avoid any further involvement with my husband and mother-in-law, I went to their house to express my intention to divorce. When I did, my husband suddenly exploded in anger and started yelling at me.
You were actually serious about getting a divorce. How can you even divorce without a job? It's terrible that you involved your parents in this mess. And it's your fault that Dad scolded me.
He ranted and attacked me with his words.
It's because of your own actions that you got scolded.
You reap what you sow.
Just sign this because I'm getting a divorce anyway.
I maintained my composure and stood firm. It was childish of my husband to blame me for getting scolded when it was his fault. As I pressed the issue of divorce, my mother-in-law grabbed my arm and shook it violently.
Kelly, you must have charmed Dad. I can't let my guard down around you. You're the worst. That's not true at all. Let go of my arm.
I shook off my mother-in-law's grip, and then my husband glared at me. Just as my mother-in-law raised her hand to strike, my father-in-law intervened loudly.
Hey! What are you doing?
His shout made my husband and mother-in-law shrink back. Even I was a bit frightened by the rare anger shown by my usually gentle father-in-law. In the ensuing silence, my husband was sweating and fell silent, while my mother-in-law began to tremble, baring her teeth and clenching her back teeth with tears welling up in her eyes. She was staring at my father-in-law.
Why do you always take her side? You are my husband, you should be on my side. You must be charmed by this younger woman, that's it.
She shrieked at my father-in-law, attacking him. It was all just baseless accusations, but she didn't stop. Disgusted, my father-in-law retorted.
Why can't you see anything beyond your own perspective? I am stopping you because what you are doing and saying is wrong. Take a moment to reflect on your own words and actions.
Despite my father-in-law's words, my mother-in-law was so enraged that she couldn't be calmed.
Shut up. You should just be on my side. If you preach at me anymore, I'll sue you for emotional abuse.
Then she began throwing dishes and glasses, starting a rampage. Both my husband and I watched in dismay as my mother-in-law lost control. Seeing his own mother break down, my husband started to lose it too.
Are you kidding me? It's your fault. You're a curse. Get out of my sight now.
He yelled those words. I was scared, but I remained firm and said, I won't leave until you sign the divorce papers. With bloodshot eyes, my husband violently signed the divorce papers. I quickly collected the papers and bowed to my father-in-law.
Father-in-law, I truly appreciate all you've done for me. You've supported and saved me many times. Thank you so much.
I expressed my gratitude to my father-in-law and immediately left the house. The signed divorce papers were successfully processed, and the divorce was finalized. Now, I could finally get away from my husband and mother-in-law. Though relieved, just divorcing was not enough to settle my feelings. I returned to my parents' home, apologized for the inconvenience I would cause for a while, and then began preparations to sue for damages with a lawyer. After being treated so badly, I figured I had every right to get back at them. I presented the voice recorder I had used as a safeguard and the records of my visits to the psychiatrist as proof of the emotional stress caused by their abuse. I was told that it was possible to make a lump sum demand for damages from my husband and mother-in-law. After suffering so much, I nodded vigorously, as if avenging years of torment, and proceeded to file for damages. Life has been quiet since the divorce. But about a week after returning to my parents' house, my smartphone started ringing repeatedly. The caller ID showed my husband, or rather, my ex-husband. Since the divorce was finalized, the only remaining interactions concerning alimony and child support should be handled through my lawyer, so there was no need for me to answer his calls. Initially, I ignored the calls, but they kept coming without a break. After much hesitation due to the incessant calls, I reluctantly answered the phone.
Hello? Kelly, please help. Ken is in big trouble.
It was my mother-in-law's voice on the other end. Sounding panicked. I could hear Ken's yelling and a man shouting in the background. As I managed to get the situation from her, it seemed that Ken, upset about being sued for alimony and child support, had tried to storm my parents' home. However, due to his erratic behavior, he was stopped by a patrolling police officer for questioning. Agitated, Ken took an aggressive stance and ended up striking the officer. My mother-in-law was calling to try to prove that it was my fault for suing him, as she believed this triggered his breakdown. I could hear the argument between the police officer and my ex-husband over the phone.
Come quickly and prove Ken isn't at fault. It's your responsibility for angering him.
Her logic made no sense. I coldly responded, "We're strangers now, it's none of my concern." My mother-in-law pleaded, "Please help," in a trembling voice, but I hung up without further discussion. I immediately set my phone to block her number. About a month later, my father-in-law contacted me to update me on Ken and my mother-in-law's situation. Ken had been arrested for assaulting a police officer and was subsequently fired from his job when his arrest became public knowledge. Now he is working part-time and using his savings to send child support and alimony. My mother-in-law, undeterred by the debacle she caused and trying to involve me in further trouble, faced a divorce proposal from my father-in-law due to her actions. The lies my mother-in-law had spread to demean me were exposed by my father-in-law, and as a result, she left, shunned by the neighbors. Currently, my ex-husband and she are living a meager life together in an apartment. On the other hand, I've successfully found a new job and am now enjoying happy days with my daughter. With the ties to my ex-husband and mother-in-law cut, my daughter's smile has increased. She's making lots of friends at preschool and excitedly tells me about her day. I plan to keep working hard to protect this smile of my daughter and create many more memories together.
Huh? Sophia, did you make a new friend?
My daughter Sophia is good at drawing and always shows me her works. But that day, the picture Sophia showed me had a girl I had never seen before. No matter how much it's a 6-year-old's drawing, I can usually tell who her friends are if I see them every day. Is this girl a new friend? That's what I thought when I asked her, but Sophia gave me an unexpected reply. This is my sister. But she has a different mom. Sophia said this with an innocent smile. Sophia's sister? A different mom? What is Sophia talking about? Unable to understand the situation, I rushed to my brother, who is a lawyer. My name is Emily. I'm a 29-year-old illustrator working from home. I met Chris at a mixer during my senior year of college, and since then, we've been living happily as a family of 3 with our daughter, Sophia. At least, that was the plan. I usually don't attend mixers, but at that time, there was someone who wanted to meet me. My friends, not wanting to miss out on a mixer with businessmen, pleaded with me to go, and I reluctantly attended. At this mixer, Chris pursued me earnestly, and as someone who was completely out of the dating game, I was swept off my feet by his charm, and we started dating. We ended up getting married the following year when I got pregnant. At that time, I was 23 years old, just about to start my career, and Chris was 3 years my senior at 26. My parents were strongly against marriage. But I was already head over heels for Chris and couldn't consider not having his child. In the end, I went against my parents' wishes and married Chris. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the beginning of my misfortune. Shortly after we married, I found out that Chris had been lying about various things. First, he wasn't a businessman but worked at a nearby factory. He also had a previous marriage and, in fact, had a child. I wouldn't have refused to marry him if I had known, but I was shocked that it had been kept from me. Chris thought that no one would accept him if they knew he worked at a factory. He thought no one would marry him if they knew he had a child from a previous marriage. Both lies were told out of his desire to marry me and stay with me. At the time, I was flattered that he wanted to marry me so badly. I was happy, believing he truly loved me. The reason for his divorce was that his wife had cheated and left home with their child. Clearly, it was his wife's fault, but it didn't change that it was his child. Chris told me he was sending $1,000 a month to his ex-wife as child support. Isn't $1,000 a month too much for child support? I did think that, but Chris wanted to provide, even if it meant stretching financially, because he couldn't be with his child. I saw Chris as a pure and kind person. After we got married, to save money, Chris moved into my place. I had been working from home as an illustrator since college. After winning a contest in my junior year, I started getting various job offers from companies and even held a solo exhibition. So, I had been living alone in a 3-bedroom condo since college. This space was sufficient for a child for the foreseeable future. Looking for a new place would have meant additional costs. So we decided it was best to live together here. Most of Chris's salary went to child support, so inevitably, rent and utilities continued to be covered by my salary as they had been when I was single. Honestly, if we could live happily as a family of 3, that was enough for me. However, after our daughter Sophia was born, Chris started coming home less and less. Chris's factory operates on a fixed rooster, so there shouldn't be any overtime, but he started coming home late, saying there were machine troubles. It started as just a few times a month, but by the time Sophia was 2, Chris would come home late from hanging out after work, saying things like, "I was invited by my colleague," or called by a buddy. Additionally, on weekends, he would leave for visitation days with his child from his previous marriage. Eventually, Chris rarely came home, and when he did, it was just to get some spending money. Then 4 years passed. One day, when Sophia turned 6, I got a call that my mother had suffered a stroke. Thankfully, she was not in life-threatening condition, but she needed to stay in the hospital for about 2 weeks. My father was traveling abroad for work, and like me, my brother had moved to the city and was thriving as a lawyer. I was the only one who could take care of our mother. I explained the situation to Chris and told him I wanted to go back to my parents' home until my mother was discharged. It's a 3-hour by plane from our home, so commuting between home and the hospital was not feasible. I can work from anywhere, but Sophia is still too young. She has school, so I can't take her with me, and she can't stay home alone. My friend takes care of Sophia after school on weekdays until the evening, but I can't leave her on nights and weekends. Chris, who hardly ever comes home, was the only one I could ask to take care of Sophia. I told Chris that even if it was just for this period, he needed to come home after work and look after Sophia. Chris, while concerned for my mother, reluctantly agreed, making a clearly reluctant face. "Sophia will be at her friend's house until 6, so go pick her up. Then, could you handle dinner and homework? That'd be great, right?
Every day?
Yes, every day.
What about the weekends?
Stay with her on the weekends too.
Can't you just take Sophia? I can't pull her out of school for 2 weeks. Besides, I'm not going out for fun. Help out for once. Sophia is your child too."
After saying that, Chris reluctantly agreed. I explained the situation to Sophia, and the next day, I headed to my parents' house. Rushing to the hospital, fortunately, the symptoms were mild, and there was no lasting paralysis. My mother was able to be discharged a bit earlier than planned, on the 10th day. My father managed to adjust his work schedule to be back on the discharge day, and they could spend some time together at home. Relieved that my father had returned, I decided to go home a bit earlier than planned. I contacted the friend who had been taking care of Sophia and my other friends and went straight to my friend's house to pick up Sophia. After thanking my friend, I returned home, and while I cleaned, Sophia quietly worked on her picture diary. Sophia loves drawing just like me, and keeping a picture diary has become her daily routine. As I finished cleaning and went over to Sophia, her picture diary was almost complete. She said it was today's entry. Today's drawing depicted her playing with her friend Hannah, whose mom had been looking after Sophia. As a doting parent, I can easily tell who she is drawing because Sophia captures people's features so well. After finishing today's entry, Sophia also showed me the diaries from the days I was away. Most of them were of her playing with Hannah and Hannah's mom. I wondered if Chris really took good care of Sophia at night. Sophia would likely have mentioned it in her diary if Chris had fed her. While thinking this, I flipped through the diary. Then, I noticed the entry from the weekend I was at my parents' house. This was the day I couldn't ask my friend to watch Sophia, so I had asked Chris. But the drawing shows an unknown girl. The picture depicted Sophia and a girl I had never seen, playing house at home. There shouldn't be any friends at our house over the weekend I was away. Could it be the child from his previous marriage? But that child should be about teenage by now. What was going on? Puzzled, I asked Sophia.
Huh? Sophia, did you make a new friend? This is at our house, right?
Then Sophia surprised me with her response. This girl?
Yes.
This girl is Sophia's sister. But she has a different mom.
What?
I let out a bewildered voice unintentionally. What does it mean she has a different mom?
Not a big sister, but a little sister?
Grasping at any possibility, I asked Sophia again, but she replied, she's a sister. Because Lisa is only 4 years old and I'm already 6, so I'm the big sister, right? She answered innocently laughing, but this was no laughing matter. Lisa? A name suddenly mentioned that I had never heard before. Sophia's sister with a different mom. Does that mean she's Chris's child? I had heard that Chris had children before marrying me. But those were before we got married, so naturally, those children would be older than Sophia. There exists a younger child with a different mom than Sophia. There's only one thing that could mean. Overwhelmed, I found myself unconsciously heading to my brother's office, who is a lawyer. In a near-panic state, I approached him and he kindly welcomed me. He listened to my story with surprise and introduced me to a reliable detective. As I explained the situation to the detective while showing the picture, Sophia chimed in, "This is me, and this girl is Lisa. Lisa is 4 years old and she's my sister. But Lisa is mean, she hid my colored pencils. Dad told me that she has to be patient because I'm the big sister. If being mean is what having a sister means, maybe I don't want one." Both my brother and the detective were at a loss for words after hearing Sophia's story. A few days later, I received a call from the detective with the results of the investigation and went to my brother's law office again. My brother had already heard about the investigation from the detective and said to me, "You might want to brace yourself for this information, are you okay?" But I was already prepared. It's okay. I kind of understand, and I'm ready. However, the results of the investigation were beyond my imagination.
Chris seems to be having an affair. Well, that figures. Just as I imagined.
When I asked, the detective seemed hesitant to continue. This is where you really need to brace yourself. Are you sure you're ready? Does that mean the affair partner is someone I wouldn't expect? Various people popped into and out of my mind. It couldn't be Hannah's mom, could it? No, that can't be. In the end, the only people I could think of were other moms. There's no use thinking about it alone. Please tell me. I resolutely told the detective to proceed, and he nodded before beginning.
The other person is Grace. Do you know her?
Grace?
The name sounds familiar, but who is she?
I can't recall.
How is she connected to my husband?
Then the detective revealed, she's Chris's ex-wife.
What? His ex-wife? But she took the child and left home. Are you saying they got back together? Since when? Why?
The answer filled my mind with confusion. My brother tried to calm me down by saying to take a moment, but I couldn't stay calm. Then the detective patiently answered my questions.
It seems that the story about her taking the child and leaving home was a lie. What? Chris was the one who left home. Apparently, their divorce was not because of discord. Their relationship continued even after the divorce. Wait, that doesn't make sense. They were getting along but suddenly divorced, and Chris left home. But their relationship continued?
Yes.
By the way, the child at that time, Karina, seems to be with Grace's parents.
The only thing that matched the story I heard from Chris and reality was the fact that Chris and Grace had divorced. Sorting through the detective's information, it turns out that Chris and Grace got married shortly after high school due to an unexpected pregnancy. Chris then dropped out of college to start working at a factory to support the family. But his salary during his first year of day shift work was meager, and they struggled to make ends meet. Despite this, Grace was unsupportive, complaining about the crying child, pushing Karina off to her parents, and living lavishly without working, buying brand items. Living with Grace under such conditions meant inevitable financial hardship. Yet, it seems they still loved each other. They must have thought of some way to live together comfortably. That's when they came up with the idea of a fake divorce. If Chris remarried someone wealthy through a fake divorce, they could secure some money. Furthermore, if Grace takes care of Karina, they could also receive benefits. Chris thought that if he lived off his new wife's money, he could give all his earnings to Grace. It seemed like a win-win situation. In fact, Grace had reported to the welfare office and was receiving welfare benefits. With Chris's salary and the grants, financially comfortable, they had Lisa 4 years ago. The weekend visits Chris claimed to be making to see his child from his previous marriage were not to see Karina, but to see Lisa, who was born 4 years ago. Even his weekday outings were visits to Grace. But despite his ongoing relationship with Grace and his affection for Lisa, Karina was still left with Grace's parents. I was stunned by their reckless actions. I felt no anger, sadness, or frustration. I was just utterly dumbfounded at them and at myself for being cluelessly content these past 4 years. But what disgusted me even more was how these two selfishly dragged countless others into their mess. Thinking of Chris, probably at Grace's place even today, made me want to confront them immediately, but my brother stopped me. He was right. Storming in there impulsively would only lead to them brazening it out. That wouldn't happen. I decided with my brother to carefully plan our next steps. I told Chris that our mother would be staying with my brother for her recovery, and that I would also stay there with Sophia for a while, and then left with Sophia. Having rented a condo near my brother's place during college because I felt safer there. I never imagined this decision would come to my rescue. My brother warmly welcomed us, and we began a temporary cohabitation. A few weeks later, as my brother predicted, Chris contacted me. He was furious on the phone.
Hey! What have you done? What is all this about? You won't get away with this.
That should be my line. Does he even realize what he's done? Yet, I headed home to put the final touches on my plan, having arranged for Sophia to stay with Hannah's mom. When I arrived, predictably, Grace was there too. "This is my house, you know." Chris still demanded, "What the hell have you done?" He didn't even try to hide Grace's presence. But soon after realizing he wasn't dealing with just me, he was lost for words. Yes, I had returned with not just my brother but also Chris's parents. After explaining everything to them, they knelt down and offered their help. I confronted him coolly. "What do you mean by what have you done? What are you talking about?" Chris probably hadn't expected me to be so assertive. He stammered, "Well, I mean..." He struggled to speak. Grace, seeing Chris's parents, tensed up and looked down. Were they giving up too soon? I pressed them. "You won't know unless you talk. Explain what happened with your own words." Not that I didn't know already, but it's important to hear it from them. I pressed them hard.
"The welfare office called about the support allowance. Maybe Emily knows something about it?"
Chris started speaking meekly. Where did his earlier defiance go? It seems the welfare office had contacted Grace about potential fraud in her benefit claims. My brother had inquired with the office and predicted they would contact her today. I again confronted them. So you've been deceiving me all this time?
Well, not deceiving per se. Not just me, you've also been lying to the government and collecting various benefits, right? Did you seriously think you'd never get caught? Really, we didn't intend to deceive anyone. It just turned out this way.
What? What are you talking about? This is obviously premeditated. Even our meeting was orchestrated by you. I was completely fooled. How stupid of me.
No, that's not it. I mean, of course, I love Emily too.
Chris tried desperately to explain, but with his remarks, Grace exploded. What? Love? Then why have a child with this woman? It makes no sense.
Because if we were getting married, having a kid was the quickest way, Grace said.
Then they started arguing with each other. Can we please put your squabbling aside for now? I interrupted them, exasperated, and Chris said, I'm truly sorry. It was all my fault. Please forgive me. He begged.
What? Forgive? Who do you think you're asking for forgiveness after all you've done, lying even to the government, and now you ask for forgiveness when your position is threatened? No way. Don't underestimate me.
When I shouted, Chris's father seemed to reach his limit and scolded, Chris, enough is enough. At that moment, further visitors arrived at our house. They were Grace's parents. Apparently, Chris's mother had contacted them. As soon as Grace's parents entered the room, they confronted her. What do you mean you were divorced? We weren't informed. We're cutting ties with you. Karina will never see you again. Karina has said he doesn't want to see you ever again. We will also take Lisa with us. We came today just to tell you this. Then, turning to me, they said, we are truly sorry for everything. With that, they took Lisa and really left. It seems Grace's parents were kept in the dark about the divorce, and the couple had occasionally taken Lisa to visit Karina. What kind of nerve do these two have? Ultimately, both children were taken by Grace's parents, and they cut ties with Chris and Grace.
Wait! Lisa!
Grace cried out, but it was too late. It was already too late to regret her actions. Afterward, Grace was presumably shocked by Lisa being taken away. Her eyes were vacant, and she was out of touch with reality. There was no point in discussing anything. Chris, realizing there was nothing more he could do, collapsed to the floor, repeatedly muttering, I'm sorry. We left the two of them despondent and went home. Later, with my brother's intervention, our divorce was finalized smoothly. Chris started paying for Sophia's child support. Without any financial strategy, the two naturally incurred a significant debt. Though both children were taken in by Grace's parents, living on Chris's salary while managing two adults and repaying debt was extremely difficult. But it wasn't just me demanding repayment. The government also issued an order to return the improperly received benefits. Eventually, Grace was evicted from her place as she couldn't pay the rent, and now it's unclear where or how the two of them are living together. Thinking of the future, I decided to move. I considered taking Sophia back to our hometown, but she had just started elementary school. Respecting Sophia's wish not to leave her friends, we decided to stay in the suburb. I rented another condo near my brother's place, where Sophia and I are now living happily together. Good news, Rosalie. I've invited my family over for you. Make sure you play the perfect hostess at this fancy restaurant, won't you? Just to double check, are you good with money? You didn't have any savings, right? What are you talking about? What's mine is yours. That means this restaurant you run, it's mine too. Everything is on the house, obviously. That's absurd. My husband, Kyle, is really foolish. Thinking he's invited the family over to my restaurant, and now he's planning to dine and dash, something's off. Besides, he doesn't understand a thing. He's about to find himself in a world of trouble. Kyle, we can't just make everything free. But don't worry about the money. I know you don't have savings, and I knew you were going to invite the family today, so I billed someone else in advance and got the payment already. Don't lie to me. I didn't tell you anything about inviting the family. And none of the relatives mentioned being billed? Saying that, my husband pointed towards the relatives. His parents, his brother and his wife, and a few other family members were chatting with a nearby waitress. Watching this, he smirked and mocked them, while I struggled to hold back my laughter, twitching around the mouth. Today, I've been preparing for this day. I'll entertain them in the best way I can, as my husband wishes. While listening to him and smiling to myself, our in-laws came over.
Hey, Rosalie, we're here to visit today. It's such a lovely place. Everyone's enjoying it.
Both of them were gentle and always smiling warmly, a stark contrast to my husband.
Dad, Mom, thanks for coming. Rosalie is pleased too. Today's on me, okay?
Even though he planned to eat for free, he lied nonchalantly. Not just to his parents, but likely to his brother and other relatives as well. It's not the first or second time my husband has lied, but he's confident he'll never get caught. Because he's seen as the dutiful son by the relatives.
Yeah, Rosalie's really been doing great. She took over the restaurant from her late parents and has been running it impressively. She struggled at first, but she managed to turn it around. She's my pride and joy.
To deceive his parents, he purposely praised me. His pride and joy, right. He barely sees me as more than a maid. Hearing this boastful talk, the in-laws turned to me and nodded repeatedly. Since the beginning of our marriage, they've genuinely recognized my efforts. Their eyes were as kind as ever. Meanwhile, my husband changed his expression so only I could see. Keep your mouth shut, he seemed to say. Rosalie is working hard, and Kyle is doing well too. Things are smooth with Brown Trading, right? Your salary has been going up, hasn't it? Yeah, that's right. I'm respected at Brown Trading. So the boss has high hopes for me. I want to lead my team by actions and results, and I'm gonna keep up the good work. Yeah, that's our son all right. Spending $15,000 like that isn't something just anyone can do. At that moment, my husband's expression clouded slightly. Today, including my in-laws and brother-in-law's family, 15 relatives are dining with us. It's $1,000 per person, making it $15,000 total, but my husband is trying to get it all for free, so he was unaware of the amount. Realizing it was more expensive than he thought, he quickly composed himself to avoid his lie being exposed. I owe it to everyone here. It's the least I can do. I just got my bonus, so no worries at all. Leave it to me. Watching my husband puff up his chest, the in-laws chuckled softly. Glancing at the clock, it was 6 p.m., so I urged my husband and in-laws toward their reserved seats. The brother-in-law and the other relatives followed to their seats soon after. At the last moment, my husband turned back to me, showing a creepy grin. An hour later, I headed over to where my husband and the others were seated. They were in a banquet room, not concerned about the surroundings, having a great time with the relatives. Everyone, feel free to order more. It helps the restaurant's sales, and Rosalie will be thrilled, so don't hold back. With each word of thanks to Kyle, came an equal number of extra orders. Combined with the banquet course meals, the total had already exceeded $20,000. Everyone knew my husband was an elite at a big corporation with a high income, and no one doubted that today was his treat. While some relatives were hesitant, it seemed like my husband was almost forcing them to order. This was when I decided to approach my husband and make a fact clear loud enough for all relatives to hear.
Since it's Kyle's treat, I had $60,000 transferred yesterday. So, everyone, please eat as much as you like without any reservations.
The relatives buzzed with surprise.
$60,000. Wow.
Classic Kyle, were words of near admiration that flew around. While the relatives reacted like this, my husband had a bewildered look, clueless about what was going on. I didn't miss his expression and added a line to start my counterattack. Well, the $60,000 isn't for the food, it's for alimony, actually. At my words, a puzzled look appeared on the faces of the buzzing relatives. An uncle next to my husband involuntarily asked, "Alimony? Kyle, what's this about alimony?" "No, I don't know about any alimony. Sometimes Rosalie jokes around, so please don't mind her." "Come on, Rosalie, don't upset everyone with jokes like that." With that, my husband tried to play it off, but he was clearly the most troubled. His face was smiling, but his eyes were not. The way he looked at me was terrifying, but I didn't stop. "Kyle, you're the one making uncomfortable jokes here. I think it's time the family knew that, right?" With that, I handed a piece of paper and a bank book to my husband. As he examined them closely, his face turned pale. "The alimony is for cheating. Kyle has been unfaithful. He's not the person you all think he is. He can lie and deceive people without a second thought. Until moments ago, the relatives were having a blast, but they suddenly lost their words, and the banquet room was enveloped in an eerie atmosphere. The document I handed to my husband was the original alimony claim, and the bank book showed a record of a $60,000 transfer. Everyone was focused on my husband and me, and silence fell for a few seconds, but it was my husband who broke it. "How funny, Rosalie, that's quite something. It looks just like a real estate and a bank book. But really, this is going too far. There's no way I would cheat." It seemed like he had switched modes already, showing his usual confident demeanor. But that confidence quickly faded, and I couldn't help but smile. "What are you talking about, Kyle? You're the one who's gone too far. Not only cheating but trying to bully me into eating for free. Lying to all the relatives that it's your treat. Rosalie. That's too much of a joke. Correct yourself quickly. Everyone, don't take Rosalie's words to heart." Without needing to say, the relatives seemed unable to believe it outright, and no one spoke up. I didn't react to my husband's words either, just watching his actions closely. Gradually, my husband started to panic. That's when he tried to get his parents on his side. "Dad, Mom, tell her to stop these senseless jokes at a time like this." Yes. Everyone, calm down and listen to me. Rosalie isn't making any senseless jokes. She's just stating the facts. It's undeniable that Kyle has been unfaithful. And she's not threatening Rosalie. He's trying to get today's meal for free too.
What are you two even saying? Are you taking what Rosalie said seriously? That's not funny at all.
The only thing that's not funny is this situation. We've come here knowing everything, to confront you. Yes, I had already confessed everything to my in-laws. That my husband uses his outward kindness to play the dutiful son, while behind the scenes he's up to no good. Even while we were waiting for our reservation time, he tried to deceive his parents, but they already knew he was lying.
Enough. I would never deceive everyone. You're ruining the good mood we had. Rosalie, what are you going to do about this?
My disclosure, and even having the in-laws on my side, was completely unexpected for him. He visibly started to lose it. He stood up, looking like he might lunge at me any moment, glaring at me intensely. "Come on, brother, calm down. Let's sit down and talk this over calmly. Nicholas, you believe me, right?" Cutting through my husband's angry shouts and sharp gaze was his brother, my brother-in-law Nicholas. Nicholas, busy with his own job, was attending today with his wife Yasmin. I knew Nicholas and my husband had been close since before I started dating him, and he is as gentle and consistently smiling as the in-laws. However, Nicholas's next action would utterly defeat my husband. He pulled a thick envelope out of his bag and handed it to my husband, saying, "You believe me, right, brother? How can I believe you, when you've been cheating with my wife?" "Nicholas, what?" The thick envelope Nicholas had pulled out was a report on the infidelity investigation. It turns out my husband had been cheating with Nicholas's wife, Yasmin. Just before, my father-in-law had said, "We've come here knowing everything." And by we, he meant the brother-in-law's family too. And it turns out, I learned about my husband's infidelity thanks to Nicholas. Hesitantly, my husband checked the contents of the envelope, turning pale as a ghost. Inside were numerous photos of him cheating with Yasmin. Pictures of them dining at a fancy restaurant, looking into each other's eyes. There were photos of them being cozy in a car and others of them embracing and kissing in front of a hotel. There's no way he could just say they were just going out. It was indeed a decisive moment, a hellish scene. Is this a joke? Unbelievable. Kyle did this, were the whispers I heard. The relatives around us were in turmoil, and the banquet hall buzzed in a whole different way. For my husband, it couldn't have gotten any worse. He was completely flustered now. No. Wait. This investigation report is fake. The photos must be doctored. Because I haven't cheated. Yasmin, we didn't cheat, right? Right. The relatives' gazes turned icy, as my husband tried to enlist Yasmin's support in his last-ditch effort. Immediately after, Yasmin, now the center of attention, bowed deeply to the floor in full prostration.
Everyone! I am terribly sorry. I have had an affair with Kyle.
It goes without saying that my husband was the most shaken he had been all day. He hadn't anticipated Yasmin fully admitting to the affair. He had been insisting the alimony bill and the bank book were fake and, thinking only of himself and taking me for granted, couldn't have imagined this. Yasmin's earnest apology captivated not only my husband but also all the relatives. While her forehead remained on the floor, she slowly began to speak. It really was just a fling. Nicholas is a wonderful husband but, well, it lacked excitement, you might say. Just doing housework and waiting at home for Nicholas to return. I started to feel like my life would forever be the same and suddenly got bored. When I approached Kyle, he was happy to go along. Everyone listened in silence to Yasmin's voice mixed with regret and reflection, as she raised her head and revealed more truths. I tried to end it immediately knowing it was wrong. But Kyle got serious about it. He threatened to expose everything if I tried to break it off. I know it sounds like an excuse now, but I am truly sorry. My husband had threatened Yasmin to continue their relationship. The relatives could only stare in disbelief at such a lack of morals. Yasmin had initiated the affair. And though she was threatened, it's hard to completely sympathize with her, but she came here today to admit her mistakes and apologize, which is somewhat redeemable. However, my husband tried to escape by lying and making excuses. Unaware that he was just tightening the noose around his own neck, he really is a fool. Brother, it's all useless. Rosalie, and our parents know everything. I'm going to demand alimony from you, and you're going to pay. Nicholas, when did you realize? You even did an investigation. You must have been sure, right? Yes, I heard it from someone. I truly despise you, brother. Right, Rosalie? That's right. It wasn't just Yasmin, he had his hands on other women too.
What, Rosalie, how much do you know? Just give me a break already.
Too bad, Kyle. I know everything. And if anyone should be asking for mercy, it's us. I never thought you'd even make a move on an employee at the restaurant. After saying this, I called a woman to the banquet hall. This woman was the waitress who had been talking with the in-laws, Nicholas and Yasmin, and several other relatives while they waited for their reservation time. Turns out, while having an affair with Yasmin, my husband had also been making advances towards this waitress. She was also attending the same school with me back in student days. Before even consulting Rosalie, who is the restaurant owner, she came to me. Kyle had threatened to destroy your family if you spilled the beans to Rosalie. You're really horrible. Nicholas had taken the waitress's consultation seriously and began to monitor my husband. That's how he found out about the affair with Yasmin. After hearing about this from Nicholas, I consulted with the in-laws and decided to support the waitress, leading to this moment. The waitress trembled slightly as she looked at my husband. She clearly still frightened of him. When the relatives saw the waitress, they all stood up and surrounded my husband. Everyone had a furious look, so my husband couldn't help but deny everything.
I don't know her. I don't know this woman. Rosalie, Nicholas. You're making things up without any evidence.
No evidence, huh? Kyle, do you really think we came unprepared? It's all on camera, your stupid actions. Right there on the restaurant's security footage. Unbelievably, my husband had been hitting on the waitress when I wasn't around. It looked like he had timed it when the waitress was alone. The camera even caught him touching her disgustingly and trying to take her outside against her will. It's ridiculous that he didn't notice the security camera. He must have been too engrossed in his affairs. I've said it before, but we know everything, brother. All you can do now is admit your guilt and apologize, just like Yasmin did. Kyle, let me ask you something. Why would you deceive Rosalie to carry on with your affairs? From what we can see, Rosalie has been nothing but supportive. She's been managing the restaurant that she inherited from her parents and taking care of home as well. What did she ever do to you? Under the cold stares, my husband flinched at his father-in-law's question. I thought there was no valid excuse for infidelity, but if I had been unconsciously pushing him into a corner, I wanted to reflect on myself too. Awaiting his response, what he said next was shocking. I married Rosalie because I felt sorry for her. Before our marriage, she was struggling to turn the restaurant around. With both parents gone, I was the only one she could rely on. I couldn't live without that feeling of superiority. And then what? Rosalie managed to turn it around. The restaurant became popular, and suddenly, I found it boring. That's why I thought of dumping her. My husband was smirking, as if he had nothing to lose. Despite already knowing his true nature, a deep disgust welled up from within. It seemed he viewed everyone but himself as mere tools. The cold stares from the relatives quickly turned to pity. A feeling of superiority felt good? Got bored and decided to dump her? Kyle, do you realize what you're saying? You're successful in your big company because Rosalie supported you. Don't you have any gratitude? No, you're wrong. I succeeded because of my own skills. Besides, isn't it normal for a wife to support her husband? Does a mother serve a father expecting gratitude? No, right? Rosalie served me because she loved me. It's presumptuous to expect gratitude for that. Enough, Kyle. I find you repulsive. We are cutting ties with you, but we will watch you until you take responsibility. Be prepared.
Fine, cut ties or whatever. I have a stable job. I can live on my own. In fact, it's a relief. Right, Rosalie? You can enjoy life more without me around. I'll pay whatever alimony or anything else, so don't worry.
My husband laughed, seemingly without a care. Looking at him, I thought again. He doesn't understand anything, knows nothing at all. Really? You can pay alimony? Aren't you about to be sued by your company, Kyle? A lawsuit for damages isn't cheap, you know? What? The company suing me? That's ridiculous. You were bragging today, weren't you? That you're respected at Brown Trading. That your boss has high expectations. That you lead your subordinates with actions and results. But it was all lies. In reality, you've been threatening your subordinates and embezzling company money.
What? I would never do something like that. I rose through the ranks on my own merit. Don't talk nonsense when you know nothing.
What you don't know, Kyle, is that all the subordinates you threatened have come forward. The company has been aware of the issue for a while. But you don't have to believe me. I'm just stating facts. It'll be interesting to see how far you fall. I explained to him in a calm tone, trying to make him understand, and the color drained from his face. If he really had no idea, he could have laughed it off. But the truth is, he was misbehaving at work too, so denying it was impossible. Seeing the realization dawn on him, he quickly turned pleading. "Rosalie, you're right, I knew nothing. I only said those things because I wanted to leave. Please continue to support me. If we divorce now, I..." "Stop right there. Don't say anything more. The relatives are about to tear you apart, Kyle. It's too late for anything now, and it doesn't matter whether you knew or didn't know. No one will help you, and you'll get your wish to live alone. Oh, and by the way, make sure you pay for today's bill. It was your treat, wasn't it?" The moment I said this, Kyle collapsed to his knees. No one reached out to help him. Today, after threatening me and deceiving the relatives to get a free meal, he finds himself unable to get off scot-free. Afterwards, I filed for divorce, and Kyle was sued by his company. Kyle ended up incurring a significant amount of debt. The reason Kyle had no savings, despite dealing with brown trading, was because he was footing the bill for entertainment expenses with the employees. However, this entertainment was merely a pretext. In reality, Kyle was just squandering money at nightclubs. Given that Kyle, who had a high-paying job, had no savings, it's clear he had been recklessly spending his money. This was entirely Kyle's own doing, so he should have dealt with it himself, but instead, he asked for help from his in-laws and Nicholas's family. Of course, no one was willing to help. Kyle had defiantly claimed he could live on his own and even laughed off being disowned, so it's no surprise. Yet, Kyle continued his futile attempts and kept sending messages to my smartphone incessantly. I was wrong. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret it, please help me. The messages clearly showed he was desperate, but it felt like just another act. Given his history of deceit and manipulation, it's hard to believe him. Still, I have not blocked Kyle's contact. I've left it unblocked so that I can receive his messages. I want to see what becomes of a person who has only thought of himself and demeaned others around him. It's uncertain what will happen to Kyle now that he has hit rock bottom. One thing I do know is that unless Kyle truly repents and changes himself, he will not be able to climb out of this pit. That much I am sure of. Rosalie, I am truly sorry for what my brother has done. It's irreparable. Nicholas apologized to me after divorcing Yasmin. The in-laws who came with him also deeply bowed their heads. I am a failure as a parent. I can't believe I didn't see my own son's true nature sooner. If only I had realized earlier, this wouldn't have happened. Kyle took advantage of your kindness, Rosalie, and did whatever he wanted. It was our responsibility to stop him. You all don't need to apologize. If anything, I am grateful. I had no one else to rely on, no parents or relatives, so thank you for always being on my side. From the beginning of our marriage, the in-laws and Nicholas had been my allies. That I was able to turn around the inherited restaurant was possible only with their support. They are genuinely kind and always smiling. They showed such fury on my behalf. That was incredibly comforting to me, who is utterly alone. I will never forget this warmth for as long as I live. I'm pregnant with Michael's child. It'll be born soon. You should break up with Michael. Shocked by my sister's words, who suddenly showed up at my house, I was more dismayed than surprised. To think she would boast about having an affair with her sister's husband and being pregnant. It was unexpectedly shameless. It's because you never got pregnant that this happened. It's your own fault. You're a defective product because of your infertility. My sister and Michael looked down on me and laughed. Their closeness, as if flaunting it, filled me with disgust. The sisters are too different. I was so hurt that I couldn't even speak. Michael's gaze was surprisingly cold. I'm getting remarried, so let's divorce. If that's what you want, fine. I'll let you go. But is it really Michael's child? After all, my sister and Michael left the house, and I was left alone. But being alone allows me to think deeply. Actually, about that. Things are getting interesting. Just watch. I will make sure they get what they deserve for what they did to me. My name is Kimberly. I married Michael, the managing director and the CEO's son, when I was 30. My in-laws, who had been very kind to me since I was just an employee, introduced us, and that led to our marriage. My parents also blessed our marriage, and relations with people around us were good. Even after getting married, we worked at the same place, and at first, everything seemed to go well. I never imagined I would be pushed into such misery later. Michael, who was initially kind, changed drastically after our marriage.
Hey Michael, if you're going to be late, at least let me know in advance.
Huh?
Why should I have to report my schedule to you? I'll do what I want. But I have to prepare dinner. Shut up. Don't order me around. You're the one doing all this on your own.
He'd complain if dinner wasn't ready when he wanted it, though. Watching Michael storm out, I sighed. Right after we married, Michael began spending money recklessly. He dumped his work on his subordinates and frolicked around. Calling it business, he roamed the nightlife almost every morning.
I thought he had settled down after becoming a professional, but his true colors showed. What do you mean? I was at the same university as him, and back then, he was famously extravagant. He was out every day and seemed to have multiple girlfriends at the same time. It was so bad that the CEO got angry. I heard he almost cut ties. After that, he seemed to calm down and get serious.
I was too shocked to speak. I could clearly hear my voice trembling as I forced it out. I had no idea. A coworker next to me nodded repeatedly.
When he joined the company, he was really serious. Everyone thought the CEO's scolding had woken him up. That's probably why he was made the managing director.
That's what I thought.
Kimberly, you're well regarded in the company. Maybe he let his guard down because you were introduced as his bride? He probably convinced himself that he could take over the company this way.
Indeed, Michael's reputation was visibly deteriorating. There were even voices saying that Michael should be fired and the current executive director should be promoted to managing director.
That bastard, he underestimated me again. He should know his place.
Michael always complains about his boss when he's at home. As he is my immediate supervisor, I felt cornered.
Why do you, my wife, have to work under him? Well, I'm in charge of accounting.
He seemed displeased with my rebuttal as I spoke up, despite being scared by his yelling. Michael banged on the wall, making a loud noise.
Shut up. Don't talk back. Get him fired. It's harassment or something. You work with him, you can figure something out.
It's impossible, he's a decent person.
Don't take his side, you're my wife.
Michael only complains without making any effort. Moreover, he has never contributed money to our household since we got married. I manage all our finances with my salary. I'm managing somehow because I work full-time, but I'm anxious about the future.
Hey, can you at least contribute some money to the house? For groceries or utility bills.
Huh?
Why should I give you my money? You work too, right? That's no way to speak. Aren't we a couple? At least help me with the living expenses.
For the first time, I stood my ground against Michael's anger. I was the one paying for everything, groceries and utilities, and life was truly difficult. It's impossible for me to support a lifestyle meant for two on my own. Yet Michael didn't understand. He probably didn't even try to. To him, I'm just a trophy, something to have for the sake of taking over the company.
What? Did you marry me for my money after all? That's not it at all. It's hard to maintain the lifestyle you want with just my salary. That's why I'm asking for cooperation. Shut up. This is why I hate poor people. It makes me sick. Don't show your face for a while.
It's impossible to discuss anything. But I hesitate to consult my in-laws. They are good people, and discussing such matters would only worry them, and I don't want to cause any strain due to Michael. They are as important to me as my own parents. If my in-laws were to scold Michael, he would take it out on me. I didn't want that. The house we live in was built by my in-laws. They provided the money and left everything about the house to Michael and me. Back then, when he was still reasonable, it was fun to make decisions about the house together, but now it feels like a distant memory. But to repay my in-laws for their kindness, I'll try a little harder. I renewed my resolve and headed to work. As I remembered my in-laws' kindness, I endured Michael for 3 more years. Michael's behavior only worsened, and now he's notoriously a prodigal son. Moreover, he boasts about not contributing money to the household at social drinking events. Because of this, people say I am meek and can't control my husband, or they pity me as a poor woman stuck with a useless man. I feel confined even when shopping, feeling like someone might be talking about me. Even among the employees, there are those who look down on me for not being able to discipline Michael.
Why do you let your husband do whatever he wants? If I had someone like that in the same house, I couldn't stand it. Are you afraid of getting divorced? Look, if you keep quiet, you might become the CEO's wife. If that playboy becomes CEO, then his wife is practically the CEO. That would be a takeover. She looks quiet, but she's scary. Complaining to Michael only results in him yelling, and if such a person becomes CEO, the employees will surely be lost, so they direct their complaints and anxieties towards me.
Kimberly, you look pale.
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
If you have any troubles, feel free to talk to me.
Thank you very much. My in-laws also subtly care for me, but I still haven't been able to discuss Michael with them. Delaying the conversation because I thought I could still endure it has led to a feeling of guilt as if I'm hiding something. Unable to express my situation well, I became reticent, and it seems that a distance has formed between me and my in-laws. We treat each other as if handling a bruise, and it's heartbreaking. They are truly good people, but I'm the reason they look so troubled.
Always playing the good girl. Do you really want to be the CEO's wife that badly, to marry such a husband? That prodigal son said you're a money grubber, and he might not be entirely wrong. After all, they even built a house for you.
My workplace has become an uncomfortable place. Going to work has started to feel increasingly depressing. The only solace is that my direct supervisor, the executive director Tyler, treats me with a very professional attitude. Michael, who unilaterally dislikes him, is surprisingly businesslike even towards me, who feels marginalized. Being distanced from my in-laws and becoming a target of rumors, his detached attitude is a relief.
Kimberly, please make a copy of this document.
Sure.
Trying to please both the executive and the managing director, playing everyone's favorite. Maybe she's thinking it'll be good no matter who becomes CEO. What an ambitious woman.
I'm just doing what I need to do. I'm only working, no matter what they say. I'm not in the wrong. No matter how many times I tell myself that, my hands still shake. I heard that after a while, my in-laws told Michael, "We cannot let you take over the company in this state." Michael, red-faced and furious, relayed this to me.
It's your fault. You never having kids is why they're saying this.
I don't understand how it's come to this. After all, he comes home in the early morning every day. How could it be easy to have a child?
Why would it come to that? Your parents just want you to work seriously. You're saying I'm not working? Don't joke. I'm far busier than you and contributing to the company. I earn a much better salary than you. You have no idea about my work.
Once it gets to this point, Michael is beyond help. All I can do is wait for him to vent his anger like a tantrum-throwing child. As I shrug and wait for the storm to pass, Michael keeps yelling at me.
It's your fault. You're not having kids. A son. Get fertility treatments or whatever, just hurry up and have an heir. That's so. Don't talk back.
Michael threw a tantrum again, throwing things around, so I ducked to avoid getting hit.
All right. I'll undergo fertility treatment. Will you help? Why should I have to do anything when it's your fault? You're the defective one. Don't mock me.
It was scary to see Michael rage, but at the same time, I felt a sense of disgust and exhaustion. Why do I have to endure this treatment? My in-laws meant well by warning him, but it seems to have backfired. But it's unimaginable for a normal person to act this way. If I do as he says, his tantrum will subside for the moment. I gave up everything and complied with Michael's demands. A year into the fertility treatment, and the tests show that my body is normal and capable of pregnancy. When it was suggested that the issue might be with my husband, Michael adamantly refused to get tested. His mood worsens whenever he or things around him are struck, and neither I nor the doctors can speak firmly. Suspected of infertility, Michael told me to see another doctor, but the results were the same no matter the hospital, and Michael only grew more irritable. Could you come to the hospital just once? There might be something I'm not noticing alone. I had been putting up with his bad mood out of fear, but one day I plucked up the courage and asked humbly.
Huh? I'm busy. I don't have time to deal with your mess.
But without your cooperation, we can't do in vitro fertilization. It seems there's nothing wrong with my eggs. I'd like to move to the next step. I know it takes your time, but could you help just once? It seemed right to say it was for my infertility treatment rather than his tests. He was less likely to get upset. He frowned slightly, but watched me with a glare.
You're paying for the treatment, right?
Of course. It's my fault. I'll take full responsibility. All right. I guess I'll go then. I was appalled by his ever-arrogant attitude, but I managed to take Michael to the hospital. He brought up money at every turn, and it was hard to tell who really was the money grubber. However, seeing how eagerly I seemed to want Michael's child seemed to improve his mood significantly. He probably enjoys being pampered. No matter how old he gets, he remains childish and immature. Even at the hospital, he reluctantly followed the instructions, then stormed off home against the advice of me and the doctors. I ended up being the only one to listen to the doctor's explanation, feeling completely helpless. Given his behavior, I wasn't too surprised by what followed. Long time no see, Kimberly.
Lisa! What are you doing here?
One day, my sister Lisa suddenly visited our house. Seeing her proudly smiling with a big belly gave me a bad feeling. Lisa had always been the playful type, and until recently, she had been living carefree at our parents' house without working. However, she stopped visiting home after I married Michael. Our parents were initially worried, assuming she was probably living off some boyfriend again given her track record, but I hadn't expected her to be pregnant. It felt like she was due to give birth soon. I'm pregnant with Michael's child. It will be born soon. Please, divorce Michael for me. It must have been planned. Unusually, Michael was at home and he hugged Lisa's shoulder, sneering at me. Just like Lisa said, I don't need a woman who can't get pregnant forever. I've put up with you just to save face for the parents, but I can't stand it anymore. You're costing a fortune on treatments without getting pregnant? Michael is troubled by that. My sister laughed triumphantly, and Michael looked down on me. Their close and despicable appearance pushed my anger beyond its limits. Really, I've been troubled by you not getting pregnant forever. A defective product due to infertility. How dare they choose such vile words? They must be thinking of nothing but hurting me. They say they don't need a defective product like you anymore. I'm getting remarried, so let's divorce. I was at a loss for words. I knew he was a womanizer, but I never thought he would cheat with my sister. When I introduced Lisa to Michael, she was overly flirtatious, but I hadn't expected it to go this far. Okay. I'll get ready, just give me a moment. Judging that I had given in, both Lisa and Michael seemed pleased. What drives them to this extent? I don't recall ever doing anything to harass or hurt them, but it's surprising to see how much they dislike me to treat me this way. Hurry up, you know. Stress is toxic to the baby. If you had any decent sense, you'd celebrate your sister and husband's new start and pack your bags and leave quickly. It's surprising to hear words about decent sense from Michael. Being lectured on morals and common sense by these people is the ultimate insult. Or better yet, can you just leave now?
A useless person who can't have kids doesn't need to be in the house. Go back to your parents. They're sweet on you, even if you're a failure.
Hearing Lisa's words made my blood boil. My parents, who supported my diligent studies and encouraged me despite being plain. Yet they did the same for Lisa, worrying and scolding her for her late returns from her nightly escapades until now. I don't think my parents' love was unequal. In fact, I often felt that despite my sister's delinquency and my being somewhat of an honor student, there was no noticeable difference in how we were loved, almost making me feel less loved. What is she talking about? I suppressed the urge to shout back and feigned calm.
It will take some time to pack and explain the situation to others. Please wait a little longer.
When I pretended to be disheartened, Lisa and Michael were very pleased. Especially Lisa, who, while pretending to be displeased, couldn't hide the smirk on her lips. Her expression twisted as if torturing me was her greatest pleasure.
I don't want to see your miserable face.
Lisa's insincere falsetto was echoed by Michael.
It would be a disaster if Lisa and the baby got sick. We have no choice but to rent a hotel for us today. Get out right now. Got it?
After saying what they wanted to, they left the house. The house that my in-laws bought for us. They must have wanted their son to be responsible. And they treasured it. Even my parents were worried about my sister. The two of them just trampled over everyone's feelings.
I'll get my revenge, no matter what.
If that's what you want to, fine, I'll give you a divorce. I wanted to divorce too, so that in itself should be welcome. But I will never allow those two to be happy. Just watch. I'll show them hell. I made my preparations. I moved out quickly with my stuff packed, but I dragged out the divorce proceedings for various reasons. In the meantime, I actively worked on gathering evidence and rallying support from others. Since Lisa's belly was quite big, she would probably give birth while I was preparing my revenge. It's because they're not planners that things turned out this way. Being unmarried and giving birth must be tough, but it seems they're not really feeling it. They kept nagging me to hurry up and divorce, but there was no urgency in their demands. Truly appalling people.
Are you sure it's Michael's child? After all, that man.
Wondering about this, I decided to talk to my in-laws. They had already heard from Michael and Lisa, so it was good timing. Everything is ready. Now, all that's left is to show them hell. A month flew by, and I heard that Lisa had given birth.
What right do you have to show up here? You're still clinging to Michael, aren't you?
When I entered the hospital room, Lisa looked displeased. She must be enjoying saying mean things to me since she was smirking. Michael also glared at me, following Lisa's lead.
I don't know what you've told my parents, but we're strangers now, so stay out of it. You got me scolded.
That's because of your unreasonable behavior, I think. But it's useless to say anything.
Oh no! My sister might be stalking Michael.
It's troublesome. I have Lisa now. Truly blissful people. I held back a sigh and tried not to show my emotions.
Congratulations on the birth.
Lisa and Michael just looked down on me in response. They can only act like this for now.
Excuse me. First of all, congratulations on your hard work giving birth.
The in-laws entered the hospital room after that, followed by my parents.
Sorry for intruding with such a large group. We have something to discuss. It's going to be a bit hectic from here on.
Lisa and Michael, convinced of their victory, sneered at me. Dad, Mom. We finally have a grandchild. Isn't that great? Please hold the baby. Lisa was already trying to charm the in-laws in a falsetto. The in-laws looked stern, and in their place, my parents spoke up.
Lisa, it seems we've spoiled you too much. We never imagined you'd grow up to treat your own sister like this. We thought we'd always be on your side, but this is too much. You are no longer welcome in our home. You are cutting ties with you.
Hearing this, my mother started crying.
I told you countless times to be considerate of others, but it was all in vain. Wait, what's going on?
Lisa was taken aback by the sudden disownment.
I can't believe you would say that to me, someone who just gave birth. I don't want to be part of a family of poor people like you.
Michael sided with Lisa. He put his hand on her and glared at my parents.
How unreasonable. How can you say such things to a daughter who's tired from giving birth? Lisa, even if they are your parents, that's unforgivable.
And then he said proudly to Lisa,
I'll protect you, so don't worry.
Michael. They were intoxicated with themselves, completely absorbed in their own world. I can't believe my sister, after all the care our real parents have given her, called them poor. The words she threw at them must have shocked my parents more than me, but they seemed prepared, unshaken. Perhaps, unknown to me, there had been conflicts or disputes between my sister and our parents, and they had written her off a long time ago.
You're acting like it's none of your business, but you too. I'm not letting you inherit the company, and you're fired as of today. Don't ever show your face again. What? What do you mean?
Michael raised his voice in response to my father-in-law's words. My sister turned pale and trembled. Now that the status she gained at the expense of disparaging her own parents was in jeopardy, it's understandable that she would react this way. It was hard for me not to laugh watching the two of them panic.
There's no one else to hand over but me. We have a grandchild now. Doesn't that secure the family's future? What era are you living in?
My in-laws were exasperated by Michael's argument. Michael looked pitiful, as if he was about to cling to my in-laws. My sister still didn't seem to fully grasp the situation, only glancing back and forth between my in-laws and Michael.
I thought you were capable enough to run the company, but even making you managing director was a mistake. I'll leave the company to a reliable employee. What? That's ridiculous.
Finally, Michael's temper exploded, and his shouting filled the room. However, both my father-in-law and mother-in-law seemed used to it and didn't even flinch.
I've been talking about becoming CEO. You can't just allow that. That's something you decided on your own.
We don't know anything about it. Until now, my mother-in-law, who had been quiet next to my father-in-law, confronted Michael with a resolved attitude.
You've been talking about becoming CEO and borrowing money, but find a job and pay it back yourself.
We can't take care of you anymore.
What?
Given Michael's history of partying, it's not surprising he has debts. As a managing director, he should have a decent income, but his extravagant and womanizing ways meant he could never cover his expenses. It seems he also bought cars and a condo without my in-laws' knowledge, and who knows how much debt he has racked up. Then my sister finally understood the situation and dropped her flattering demeanor, glaring at Michael.
What's going on? This isn't what we agreed on. Why do you think I had this child?
But Michael was too busy yelling at my in-laws to pay her any mind.
You guys told me to prove the lineage if I have a grandchild. That's why we had the tests done. What was all that for?
My sister's face was drained of color. The tests must have been bad news for her.
What? I wasn't informed about this.
Michael frowned at my sister's shrill voice as if he found her annoying. Just a moment ago, they looked like a happy couple.
What are you fussing about? It's my child, so there's no problem. Shut up, I'm busy right now. Actually, about that.
At that moment, a doctor my father had called, who was also a friend of my father-in-law and was cooperating with our revenge, walked into the hospital room with a troubled look.
Lisa's child is not related to Michael by blood. What?
The room fell silent for a moment. My sister gasped, and Michael broke out in a cold sweat. With the doctor's words, their faces turned ashen. This was my moment. I pulled out various photos I had hidden in my bag.
What is this? What are those?
Dozens of pictures showed her with different men, some depicting a man and woman entering a hotel. While the woman was consistently my sister, the men weren't just Michael. It seemed she had restrained from relationships since her pregnancy, preventing me from gathering evidence. However, my sister's ex-boyfriend, who had been dumped because she was pregnant, had hired a detective to investigate her infidelity. I had compensated him for the investigation results.
Your ex-boyfriend, who you dumped because you got pregnant, hired a detective. If you want, I've also gathered testimonies from him and other men you dated.
Michael looked at my sister with murderous eyes. He may look like a victim, but he needs to fall into this hell too.
And remember when we went to the hospital for the fertility treatment? I have those test results too. What? Tests? I wasn't informed. Preliminary tests are required for in vitro fertilization.
It's standard procedure. The doctor tried to stop Michael by explaining this. But he ignored the doctor's words and left on his own. His selfish behavior drove him into this corner, leading to this situation. It was all his own doing.
Your sperm motility is very low. You are definitely suffering from male infertility. If you think it's a lie, take a good look at the test results. No, that's a lie.
Michael's reaction was more amusing than I had imagined. His face turned pale, and with trembling hands, he snatched the test results I handed him. He widened his eyes, repeatedly reading the content, and sweat broke out all over his body. His lips quivered as if he was about to collapse.
The DNA test also showed that the child isn't yours, and the father is probably one of the men in these photos.
I told Michael as he was shaken by the fact he was infertile. Then, Michael shoved the test results back at me and yelled at Lisa.
You deceived me! You whore!
But Lisa retorted just as fiercely.
Shut up! It's your fault for being sterile. No way! It's your fault for being a whore.
Michael seemed unwilling to accept the reality and glared at me next. What a mess.
Hey! You're lying, aren't you? Can you believe this piece of paper? You're just harassing me. It's all revenge because you got dumped. The defective one is you.
Defective, you say? My in-laws and parents frowned at his words. Whether he realized or cared about the atmosphere around him, the more Michael spoke, the worse he made his own situation.
My test results are normal at any hospital. If you can't believe it, why don't you try getting tested at various hospitals yourself? Like I have time for that. Get real.
Finally, my father-in-law raised his voice.
It's you who needs to get real. Have some shame. It's disgraceful. Please, no more shame. It's embarrassing for Kimberly.
With those words from my in-laws, Michael flinched. Instead of his yelling, Lisa chimed in.
Your actions have doomed me too. What are you going to do about it? Shut up, whore. That's my line. You completely deceived me. Take the kid and disappear.
An unbearable argument ensued. Ultimately, it's a relationship tied by money. Their true colors and desires exposed, it was embarrassing even to watch.
You wouldn't have any good qualities if you didn't have money. An old flashy woman talking big.
My in-laws and parents held their heads in dismay.
I'm at a loss for words. How did they end up this way? I feel sorry for the baby. The child is innocent.
I was worried about the child too. With such parents, the future seems uncertain, and it's questionable if the child can even be properly raised. Unconcerned with our worries, my sister looked at us. Apparently, she cared more about herself than her child's future.
You caught a weird man, and now my life is ruined. What are you going to do about it? Take responsibility.
Michael grabbed Lisa's shoulder. He looked ready to strike.
What did you say? You. Don't touch me. You sterile man.
I was utterly exasperated. I let out a long sigh, releasing all the pent-up frustration I had been holding back.
Your reckless actions are your own responsibility, not mine. In fact, I wish you would take responsibility for them. Huh? Don't joke with me. You always look down on me. I've always hated the way you look at me.
I believe it was actually my sister who looked down on me for living so earnestly. Maybe my sister had her own reasons towards me and our parents.
What a coincidence. I've also been despised by you continuously, and I've never liked your words or attitude. What kind of way is that to talk? You really are not a nice woman. That's why you're abandoned.
That must be what they call a double standard. Their talk is completely nonsensical.
Negotiation is a waste of time. To conclude, I've decided that you both will take responsibility.
I confronted my sister and Michael with a copy of the demand for damages that I had a lawyer prepare. I'm filing for divorce against Michael. Talking it out with these two would be futile, so I resorted to drastic measures.
You will definitely pay up.
Considering the years and treatment I endured, it's a small amount, but the two of them exploded in anger.
You money grubber! You want money that badly.
I just want to show them hell. Money is just a means to that end. From their reactions, it seems this was the most effective. Their disgraceful squabbling was too much, and it seemed our parents could no longer bear it, raising their voices.
Considering what Kimberly has been through, this amount is too small. Be thankful that this is all it is. How can someone who cheated with her own sister's husband say anything now? You have no grace.
Scolding from blood relatives has no effect on selfish people. Their eyes glittered as if everyone but themselves were the enemy. The sight of them raving like madmen, even if anticipated, was frightening.
If you say we're strangers, then stop pretending to be parents. That's right. You have nothing to do with us anymore.
If they had shown some remorse here, perhaps the disownment might have been retracted. But foolish people prioritize their trivial pride and desires, oblivious to the consequences.
Why did it come to this?
Michael and I made eye contact. I had a bad feeling. But Michael acted before I could. He glared at me with murderous intent and lunged.
Kimberly! It's all your fault. Ouch!
I screamed involuntarily. But the expected impact never came.
Tyler! You were here too!
Tyler, the executive director who was outside the room, restrained Michael. My father-in-law, looking down at the fuming Michael, seemed sad.
We've decided to let Tyler take over the company, so you can peacefully work.
Michael had always despised Tyler. He had always feared that his position was being threatened. Now that his fears had materialized, it seemed his mental balance had finally broken. Like a child throwing a tantrum, he began to scream and thrash about. But Tyler, holding him, didn't flinch.
I've always thought he was too much to handle, but I never imagined it would come to this.
Are you all right?
Please take him away quickly.
Soon after, security arrived. They took over from Tyler, trying to escort the raging Michael out of the hospital. At this point, Michael finally realized he was in a pinch. He broke away from the security guard and clung to my leg. The tears in his eyes as he looked up at me pathetically were utterly repulsive.
I was wrong. Please don't leave me. Don't you have any pride?
Tyler spoke up for me, saying what I wanted to say. He then pulled Michael off me and protectively put his arm around my shoulder. It seemed that Michael had come to realize everything in this sequence of events.
Fooling around. Ridiculing me. Don't think you're the only one who can have a good life. Whore.
With his parting shot, he was led away, and I hoped I would never have to face him again. I can only hope that the trial progresses smoothly. Left alone in the hospital room, my sister saw Tyler holding me and changed color.
You're also dating other men, aren't you? I don't know what you are misunderstanding, but she has done nothing unfaithful. I am the one who has fallen for her and am courting her.
Embarrassed by his words, I wanted to hide my blushing face and looked down. My in-laws, my parents, and Tyler all watched over me warmly. Afterward, Michael and my sister were cut off from the family, struggling to pay off debts. Michael intended to marry my sister, but after realizing he had no money, she dismissed him and left him. Furthermore, she did not take the child with her, so my parents adopted her and named her Anna. She's a lovely girl. There was no issue with adopting her as it was the plan all along, but seeing my sister abandon her child in the hospital made me realize just how terrible a person she was. She was not fit to take care of a child. While my parents are primarily raising her, I, having returned to my parents' home after separating from Michael, am also helping. I continue to work at my former in-laws' company, maintaining a good relationship with them. My former in-laws also dote on my sister's child as if she were their own granddaughter. Surrounded by love, the child is growing up healthily. I heard that my sister was working in the nightlife, but apparently, she got hooked on a guy and disappeared. Michael, too, chased by debts payments, was deserted by several women who had been eyeing him as the next company CEO. Moreover, the massive debts payments seem endless, and like my sister, he is rumored to be on the verge of disappearing as those lending him money are reaching their limits. Years later, I married Tyler. We have 2 children and are living happily. Come on, today we're going to Grandma's house.
Yay! I'm going to play games with my sister.
Don't be too spoiled with your sister, okay? Anna, too, has a good relationship with us, and she is adored as a big sister by my children. Kimberly, watch your step. Thanks, love. Tyler has been kind to me for years since our marriage. He says he fell for my true strength and treasures me. With him, I am confident we can overcome anything and will always be happy. This must be a reward from God for surviving through hell. I love you. I love you too. I have finally grasped happiness.